Great. So, Julie, tell me a little bit about what you do.
I'm a short-term foster carer. So with Ruth, my housemate, we've been doing short-term fostering for about 7 years. That means fostering children who've just come into the care system, and the assessment wheels and the legal wheels are turning to try to decide what's going to happen to them long term. And on average, they spend 8 or 9 months with us. I think the shortest placement we've had is 3 months, longest about 14, 15. So
And how many children have you had over that time?
In the 7 years, we're now on number 14. Yes.
And what have you learned through that experience?
That I'm incredibly selfish, and there's nothing like childcare, particularly when it involves very sudden transitions. It's not like the gradual transitions of natural childcare, where your children gradually grow up and become independent. Our transitions are, you get a phone call and 2 hours later you get the child. And then at the other end of the placement, the child leaves. So our transitions are really sudden. And I've not had anything else in my life that's made me recognise and acknowledge how selfish I am, because nothing like a child removes your autonomy. If you can get to go to the toilet, oh, happy day.
Great. And what about God in all of that? Where has God been for you in that whole experience, all those years, all those different children?
Our faith was the primary driver for going into fostering, because God has a heart for the vulnerable. It came about as a conversation with a friend, and we thought, yeah, let's do this because God has a heart for the vulnerable. In terms of sustaining us as well, I just don't think we wouldn't have survived. We'd have bailed out a few years ago. We struggle to understand how we sustain it. It's quite an experience in life to see something working in your lived experience and yet not understand how we can sustain this recurrent loss. So I think that to us, that is a real experience of God's love, that the capacity of the human heart to love again appears to be limitless. We don't understand that, but that is our experience. So I think being a Christian, it makes a difference to our understanding, doesn't it? It radically alters our understanding. I really have to accept that my life is not my own. If we're going to say yes to a phone call, we are signing away our autonomy for the next, on average, 9 months. It helps to actually believe that your life is not your own if you're going to make that choice. It helps to understand that we are being poured out on the ground, aren't we? So we're all being poured out on the ground for something in life. And are we going to do that by default, or are we going to do it by design? And we'd rather do it by design for something that has eternal value. And the Bible tells us that when everything else has passed away, faith, hope, and love will remain. And I can't think of many more investments of my finite resources in life that would better embody faith, hope, and love than fostering helpless children who are damaged, but we have faith for them, we have hope for them, and we love them. There is no more meaningful investment, is there?
Yeah. So today we're remembering Ascension Day, where Jesus left his disciples and went into heaven, and that in some way seems to reflect that message, that the experience of when your children, when you've finished fostering them, suddenly they're taken away from you. How do you cope with that sudden loss?
We keep busy and we take another one. We find that we struggle more in the periods where we've had quite a prolonged gap, which usually has been out of our own choice because we've wanted to travel or catch up with people. One of the best ways of moving on is to just get another child. I think what happens with the loss, with fostering, is that loss is always an evolving experience, isn't it? It's not just an event. So if you lose somebody you love, yes, you lose them at that point in time, but the experience of that loss evolves as you reach your own milestones and they're not there. The experience evolves, and it's a bit like that with fostering. Each time we lose another one, it's like we lose them all over again. But because we're rehearsing that loss, in a way, you reach a kind of point of acceptance. It doesn't stop hurting, but you have to find a way to survive. It's not easy, and we don't fully understand how it works, and the support of our church family helps a great deal. One of the other practical things that helps a great deal is our ongoing contact with the children. We're in contact with all of them to varying degrees. Some of them live abroad, some of them we see a handful of times a year, others we see once every 2 years, but we might get a photograph. And it really helps to see them moving on in spite of their baggage. If they can do it, so can we. So it's lovely to see them growing up, first day at school, that kind of thing, getting a younger sibling, all those big life events for them really help us to think, look, they're doing okay. They're not permanently frozen in our memories as some vulnerable little child whom we betrayed by handing them on. If we can see that they are actually growing up, that really helps.
Great, thank you. Anything else that you think you kind of your faith and how your faith has been affected by fostering?
It's where the rubber meets the road, isn't it? It's one thing to think you know what you believe. It's quite another when it's tested. And I think with fostering, we know in our minds why we're doing it, because God has a heart for the vulnerable, and we have the health and strength and opportunity to do it at this stage in our lives. Sometimes at 4 a.m, when you're sitting on the stairs trying to train someone else's screwed up child to sleep, it isn't always apparent why you're doing it. And I think there are times in life when it's really tough, when we are driven back to the reasons why we're doing this. You need that anchor, because sometimes feeling is not enough to sustain it, is it? It's like any important commitment. It must be the same in a marriage. Yes, it's best to sustain that by investment and by feelings, but there are times when feelings are not enough, and you really have to come back to your shared understanding of what you're doing in this relationship. Understanding really does matter, and I think that our faith in that sense is what anchors us. You sometimes have to cling to the anchor of why you're actually doing something in the first place. And that's what, for us, that's what our faith does.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Julie. Really appreciate that.